So, people are very often surprised or even shocked when I say that I am a deeply introverted person. They see me interact with people quite comfortably, speak in front of large groups of people, facilitate workshops, listen attentively while I'm supporting people through hard times, and smile welcomingly and give my full attention when people come up to me to vent or tell me their problems. They think they're seeing an extrovert, someone who's comfortable with, gains energy from, and feels recharged around other people. Because I can hold a conversation. I can stand on a stage in front of a microphone and hundreds of people. I can connect with people. But being good with people is a skill. And it's one I've worked really hard to build. Being energized by people, that's wiring. And they are definitely not the same thing. Just because I'm good with people, and don't take this wrong if you happen to know me personally, doesn't mean that they don't exhaust me sometimes. Because some of us who appear social in social situations actually aren't extroverted. We've just learned how to override our true character during social interactions. And neither introversion nor extroversion is a bad way to be. I think we just need to learn to be a bit more sensitive to what might be happening on the other side of the conversation and the invisible cost some interactions carry for other people. Because what energizes one person may be completely depleting for another. So today, I thought I'd talk about it. Let's dig into that. Life's messy. Growth is uncomfortable, and healing rarely follows the plan. Welcome to Transformative Journeys, where growth meets grit, healing gets honest, and resilience becomes a practice. Around here, we use storytelling, neuroscience, and a lot of self-compassion to make sense of the human experience and to grow through what we go through. Welcome back to Transformative Journeys with Joanna. I'm your host, Joanna, and just because who doesn't love a good tie-in, this episode was conceived on that 3.5-hour drive home from doing a volunteer presentation for Threads of Life a few weeks ago, when I also brainstormed the last episode on dealing with high-load seasons, because part of my exhaustion during that few-week stretch was due to all the social interaction I needed to do, not just for my presentations, but I have a day job where I have to people too. And all that peopling was sapping my energy way more than all the driving. So here's the thing. I think part of the reason why people are often confused or surprised when I say I'm an introvert is because I'm not shy. And people often confuse introversion with being shy, being awkward with people, or not liking being around people. Sometimes introverted people are shy, but not all of us are. And the version of me most people see now is kind of an edited version. I wouldn't go so far as saying it's a curated version, and it's definitely not a fake or a front that I present in public, but it's definitely a practiced version. Part of that is because I'm 60 years old with 45 years of experience interacting and working alongside of people and learning to show up capable, engaged, and present. And part of it is because many of the signs of introversion aren't actually noticeable to anyone who doesn't know you well, and maybe not even recognized by the people who do. We've also gotten very good at not being recognized, whether that's because our jobs require us to be outwardly amiable, because our families are very sociable, or because we need to appear outgoing to fit in with our circle of friends. I've always leaned heavily towards the introverted end of the scale. I was the kid who probably spent 75% of her free time in a book. I wasn't really shy. I don't recall ever being, socially anxious. I played outside with the neighborhood kids. I rode my bike, watched a bit of TV, played with Barbies. But I spent a lot of time with my nose in a book. The librarian at my elementary school used to tease me that I had read just about every book in our well-stocked library by the time I was in about grade 4. Some of them several times. Even as a teenager, with homework, roller skating, volunteering at the YMCA every Saturday to help pay for my membership, and of course, talking with my friends about who the cutest boys were, taking up a lot of my free time, I still read a ton. There was almost always a novel in my purse or bag, and if we were driving anywhere, waiting anywhere, at the arena all day while my brother was at hockey practice or playing a game, and there was a friggin' boatload of that, visiting where there were no kids my age, which was most of the time because most of my parents' friends had kids much younger than me, you'd find me in a corner reading. And I loved being alone, just as much as I loved being with my friends. If you'd known me as a young adult, you'd probably have pegged me as more of an extrovert, to be honest. I wasn't a huge partier because I had kids very young, but I'd sometimes go out to the bars with my friend or friends. I had more than one friend, honest. Or, to get-togethers, parties, and everyone thought I was a social butterfly. They saw me as being a pretty sociable person, laughing, having fun, engaging easily with people, and thought, Joanna's so outgoing, she's so much fun to be around. What they didn't see, and what I didn't understand back then, was why it took me so long to recover after. And not as in recovering from, an alcoholic hangover, although truth, that happened sometimes too. Not because of the staying up late and getting up early. God, to have that much energy these days. But because I needed days and days alone, just me and my kids, afterwards, to feel recharged again. Alone time has never been a problem for me. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I am content and happy with nobody but my own company most of the time. And I promise this is going somewhere other than Joanna's life story, so stick with me. So let's back up a bit to talk a little introversion and extroversion 101. There's actually a decent amount of neuroscience behind this. It's not just a personality quirk, it's actual wiring. So the word introvert comes from the Latin words intro, meaning inward or to the inside, and vertere, meaning to turn. Literally, it means turning inward. And the word extrovert comes from the Latin words extro, meaning outward or outside, and vertere, I think that's how it's pronounced, meaning to turn. So it means to turn outward. First of all, they're not binary. You aren't 100% one or the other. I think it's a bit like a sliding scale or a spectrum that can move a little depending on things like the environment you're in and the people you're with, what's going on in your life at any given time, and, even how many turns around the sun you've done. At one end of the scale, we have the introverts who don't really get energized by social interactions. In fact, quite the opposite. There's actually research showing that introverts process more stimulation at once, which explains why we hit the overload point faster. They tend to enjoy lots of alone time and need to recover their energy after social engagement. They prefer to work independently. They process things best when they're on their own, and they can be somewhat reserved sometimes, and they're often keen observers and good listeners. When they socialize, they often prefer to do it in small groups or one-on-one. Extroverts, on the other end of the spectrum, enjoy working in groups and feel energized in those situations. And there's neuroscience around this too, connected to dopamine and reward systems, where some people feel energized by interactions and others just don't. Extroverts are usually seen as very outgoing and sociable. They tend to make friends easy and enjoy being at the center of lots of social interaction. And they're often the ones who are organizing events to get people together. They might be more inclined to talk lots and listen less. And for them, too much alone time is uncomfortable and draining. And most of us are either somewhere in between along the sliding scale, or even in two different places along it, depending on where we are. Maybe at work you're fine with leading people in meetings, but at home, all you really want to do is be alone. One of the biggest impacts on whatever we are on the scale is how our brain processes stimulation and energy. For more extroverted people, when they walk into a room full of people, they feel more energized. But to a more introverted person, they need to pause before they walk into that room and maybe take a deep breath to prepare themselves for interaction while their brain goes, "Oh, we're going to need a nap after this." It's not necessarily that an introvert doesn't like being around people. It's that we hit our threshold for emotional and cognitive capacity when we're around people a little faster. So it isn't that as introverts we can't do it. I do it all the time at work, when I'm volunteering with my family. I show up and I am fully with people. I connect with, hold space for, and sometimes support people. I participate in and facilitate conversations. And it matters to me to be fully present while I'm doing those things and to do them well. But there's a difference between doing something well and doing it without a cost. And I think an important part of this is recognizing that there is a cost. Not just an introvert recognizing the cost and what they can do to prepare for and recover from exhausting interactions, but for people who are more naturally extroverted, to understand what's happening behind the scenes so they don't misinterpret the disengagement they might, perceive as an introvert's capacity starts to wane. Even if you think you know someone who's pretty introverted really well, the expense might not be visible. Maybe you'll notice the mental fatigue. And do you know how many times I have heard, "Are you feeling okay? You seem a little cranky today." If you're perceptive, you might even notice the emotional depletion. The other one I hear is, you seem a little short today. Are you tired? But people don't see what's physiologically going on inside due to overstimulation, or how much quiet time it takes for an introvert to recover afterwards. We hide those things so that we don't appear incapable. The crash doesn't happen in front of others. It happens behind closed doors when we finally get quiet. And this isn't just about me and the kinds of things that I need to bring out for that version of me. It happens in a lot of spaces. Think about authors who are often such good writers because they spend so much time alone in their own heads. Out on book tours, interacting with strangers, smiling and chatting at their book signings. Speakers on stages everywhere who may or may not be comfortable behind a microphone or speaking to people afterwards, but they do it because they're passionate about what they're talking about. The workshop facilitators who are enthusiastic about sharing something, but who require lots of prep time before and lots of mental or emotional recovery time after. Teachers, the ones who teach because they love kids or because they're passionate about the importance of education, but who quietly spend the evening recovering from a day where everyone assumes that because they're smiling, engaging, and maybe even entertaining, they naturally thrive in it. And really, anyone in a role where they hold space for others. There's the role that we prepare for before, and then there's what happens after it's over for the day or the event. Because that's what this episode's really about. The invisible cost that often exists behind that competence. In my situation, people are seeing a practiced version of me that I trained, not the version who's learned why and how I need rest. The version who enjoys the long drives to and from presentations because the drive there gives me time to quietly build up my energy reserves before I get on stage or engage with a group when I'm facilitating a workshop. And I call that my inhale before an event. And then the drive home gives me quiet time to decompress my emotions that, my presentations may have elicited, but also to replenish the energy that gets depleted by both my nervousness about speaking in front of people and the individual or group interactions that sometimes happen afterwards. I call my drive home my exhale time. And in my cases, with what I'm doing, those interactions aren't just social. Sometimes they're emotional too. Sometimes it's small talk and talking about threads of life, but very often they're small moments with emotional weight. People coming to me and sharing their own experience or connection to someone impacted by a workplace tragedy or a loss. Someone who wants to express gratitude that Threads of Life exists, or to the speakers who share their very personal stories to promote the importance of workplace safety. People with questions about Threads of Life, about what I do with them, about my son. And sometimes people sharing their own very vulnerable story of loss or recovery. While I'm there with them, I'm there with them, holding space for them in real time. So that time alone afterwards isn't just self-care time. It's time I spend absorbing and processing those emotions, feeling my gratitude for having the opportunity to do what I do, and refilling my cup. And sometimes it takes a day or two for that cup to come back to full capacity. And here's something I want to be really, really clear about. I don't hate those interactions, not even a little bit. For me, they matter and they're healing. Even while they're draining my battery, they're filling my heart. And on a cognitive level, they're also helping to reduce my imposter syndrome. And yes, I experience imposter syndrome in my volunteer work too, not just here on my podcast. They reinforce purpose for me. Something I need in storage for times like those high load seasons when I talked about in the last episode, when I'm questioning whether the exhaustion is worth it. And they remind me of why I do what I do, especially on days like around the anniversary of my son's death or near his birthday when I'm more emotional and doing presentations can be really hard because both of those times of year happen to coincide with times of year where requests for presentations from Threads of Life increase. Either way, just because something is meaningful to you doesn't mean that it doesn't kick the shit out of you sometimes. Because you can feel good about the interactions and still have to do the work to recover from them. And I have something really important I want to add here, like really important. If you've ever walked up to a speaker to talk to them, stood in a lineup to meet an author to get them to sign a copy of their book, wanted to stop someone to tell them that their work matters, please don't stop doing that. And I'm serious here. For most of us doing out-facing work, whether it's for a paycheck or as a volunteer, those moments matter more than you might realize. Just remember that in those moments, while you might be bringing one moment, they might be holding many. So that 2-minute conversation, that 30-second, thank you so much, I enjoyed that story you want to share, and they do want to hear, might be the 20th, 30th, 50th one they've held that day. So pay close attention to the context and the cues of the person you're approaching. Because yes, most of us want that connection, but connection doesn't need to be long to be meaningful. And I want to turn the conversation around a little bit now, because this isn't about extroverts draining us poor little introverts, or introverts whining about the cost of doing something that I love. It's about how we interact with each other and support each other, because I see every interaction as an energy exchange. And that's a good thing, in my opinion. We all have unique personalities, and there might be generalish types of personalities, but all of us are unique and individual. And we should be happy about that. Can you imagine a world where everyone's personality was the same? Ugh. 100 million Joannas. Anyways, so if you are more introverted like me, we need to remember something too. It's not fair to expect others to read and manage our energy, especially if you haven't even learned how to recognize and communicate it yourself. I've had to learn this the hard way, and we're going to get into how that works next. I'm going to pause for just a second here before we get into the part where I lovingly call out both introverts and extroverts. If you're listening to this and thinking, wow, I might be running a little low on battery lately, I've created a bunch of free tools and resources that might help. There's things like the Bounce Back Blueprint, mindfulness tools, self-care resources, stress management strategies, and a few other things designed for real people who are navigating real life. No toxic positivity, no good vibes only, no inspirational quote telling you to rise and grind, just practical tools that can help make hard seasons a little easier to carry. They're all linked in the show notes. And if you'd ever like to support the podcast, there's also a Buy Me a Coffee link there too. No pressure. Seriously, the fact that you're listening here means more than you probably realize. All right, let's get back to it. When I first started attending Threads of Life family forums, which are like a weekend support conference for families coping with the outcomes of workplace tragedies, fatalities, and occupational illnesses, I signed up for everything. Breakfast till bedtime. Communal breakfast, workshops all day, great ones on everything from healthy coping strategies while you're grieving to what to expect during ministry investigation and coroner's inquests to specific groups for moms, men, sibling, but still interaction. Communal lunch in between, communal dinner, evening social activities, all of it. And in spite of everything positive about it, it would take me a week or more to, I guess you'd call it, recover. For some people, that's the perfect support weekend. Community, learning, support, social interaction. Me, I had to learn to say no. Not to the event. And not to everything. I now know what I need there to fill my cup. And what I need to do to ensure that it doesn't get emptied just as much. Communal breakfast? Okay, I can do that. And since it's the one meal that many people don't attend, or some attend early, and some like me squeak in the last 10 minutes to scarf some bacon and eggs before the day starts, I am not a morning person. Breakfast is perfect for me. Sit down at an almost empty table. Nobody really expects a lot of conversation first thing in the morning. Perfect. Workshops? Absolutely. Attending and sometimes facilitating them. Lunches and dinners? They're obligatory, and as a longtime family member, one of my assumed roles is actually to seek out new family members and just sort of touch base with them to make sure they're doing okay and offer a bit of support if they're struggling, which in spite of many new family members' reservations, maybe I'll tell you a story about mine someday, about attending their first family forum in the first place, happens less often than you'd think, because by lunch or dinner time on Saturday, most are pretty glad they came. But once dinner's over, I now know it's time for me to retire to my room, to go for a walk, to find a quiet place outside to sit by myself. I rarely socialize after the regular day's events are over now, because something important that introverts need to understand and take ownership of is that sometimes the exhaustion isn't just from the interactions. It's from the fact that we didn't leave when we needed to. Sometimes, ask me how I know, we've actually blown right past the point where our low battery sensor started flashing, and then go, holy shit, what happened, when we find ourselves curled up in a fetal position hugging Ben and Jerry, because it's not just the battery that's empty, the alternator's fried too. That, my friends, that's on us. On the other side of the coin, if you are someone who does feel energized by being around people, that's great for you. You're sure as hell not doing anything wrong. But you may not realize or understand that not everybody experiences interaction and engagement the same way as you do. And just because the person you're interacting with is still smiling and paying attention to what you're saying doesn't necessarily mean that they're okay. There's always an energy exchange when people are engaging. And yours might be filling up, but someone you're with might be quietly running out of it. So I think we need to meet in the middle. Those of us who are introverted, it's our responsibility to pay attention to our limits and know them in advance if possible. Have a few polite exit lines in our back pocket, like, I'm going to head out soon, or I've pretty much peopled out for the day, so I'm going to get going. It's on us to plan for and build in recovery time wherever we can. And it's up to us to give ourselves permission to know when to step away and to do it. And for all you extroverts out there, maybe pay a little bit of attention to who you're talking to. Do they seem equally engaged in the conversation, or are they getting quieter and quieter? Start watching for cues that the person you're interacting with might be running out of juice. Shorter responses, subtle withdrawal from the conversation, less eye-to-eye contact. You can maybe even, especially if you know them well, check in with them. Because here's something not many people are going to say to your face. Except Joanna. Sometimes we have totally checked out emotionally and mentally, but we're too polite to step away from the conversation, especially if it's a one-on-one conversation. And most of all, don't take early exits by people personally. As the saying goes, it's not about you, it's about me. I think in the end what I'm trying to say here isn't that introverts need to become more extroverted or extroverts need to become more introverted, and definitely not that we all need to be responsible for carrying all the weight in every interaction that we have with people. Just that the world we inhabit day to day can be improved when we start to realize and pay attention to the fact that we all move through it a little differently. What fills one person's cup, well, it might be emptying someone else's. And just being a little bit more cognizant of that can help us do a better job of making sure everyone gets a chance to refill their cup. So now I'm going to leave you with a few things to think about or journal this week. Be kind and compassionate, but ask yourself, when's the last time I noticed that I left an interaction energized, neutral, completely depleted? Can you think of what contributed to that feeling? Try making 2 lists or, maybe musing about them separately. Things that fill my cup and things that drain my cup. Are you surprised by anything on those lists? And think about someone in your life who seems very different from you socially. How might they be experiencing social interaction differently than you? And what assumptions might you be making about their energy needs? This week, we kind of talked about introverts and extroverts, but really, more importantly, about why some of us walk away from interactions feeling filled up and why some of us walk away needing to go home and refill. Neither's wrong or right. They're just different. But I think that considering how engaging with others impacts us and other people is an important conversation. Because when we start paying attention to those differences without judging them, we stop accidentally draining each other. When what we really want to do is just to connect. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. Introversion isn't about not liking people or being shy or awkward in social situations. They might be the people you least expect to see on a stage or interacting in public ways. And extroversion isn't just about being the wild child life of the party or the dynamic leader who's good at taking charge in a crisis. They might actually love being in social situations, but aren't necessarily the most chatty person in the room. It's really about how our brains are wired and the way we process engaging with the world. Each have different ways that they need to recharge their batteries, but both do need to recharge. We sometimes make assumptions about people based on what we think we see when we meet them. So I think the most important thing I'd love to see you take away today is being good with people does not mean being energized by people. And being energized by being around people doesn't mean you're good with people either. So maybe, let's just try to be good people. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Come say hi to me on Instagram at transformativejourneys.joanna or visit my website. You can say hi to me there. I do an enhanced version of this podcast on YouTube. It has on-screen prompts, beautiful visuals, and it's just a bit more of an immersive experience. So head over to my YouTube channel, Transformative Journeys, to check it out. And if you do have an idea you'd like to hear me talk about, leave me a message and you might just see it in a future episode. And last, I know we all ask it, but it would mean a lot to me if you could tap the bell, the like, whatever, maybe even subscribe. It does help my channel get noticed. I will make you a deal. You tap it. I will continue to drop the best of what's in my heart and my slightly sarcastic soul so we can keep learning together. Until next time, this is Joanna reminding you that it doesn't matter if you fall. What matters is how well you bounce. This is Transformative Journeys. See you next time. Your support helps me keep creating free tools and honest conversations. Because let's be real, even when you love what you're doing, sometimes it takes a whole lot of metaphorical duct tape to hold it all together. If you'd like to toss a little love into the duct tape fund, you can now support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. Hey, just a disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not replace the advice of a medical or mental health expert. I'm not a licensed counselor or therapist, just a human with a mic and a story of growth and resilience. No degree, no fancy letters after my name. I'm a full-time student at the School of Hard Knocks, University of Life, where I figure I'll graduate when I take my last breath. In other words, I'm just Joanna, a fellow human being on my journey through this thing called life, and your guide on this transformative journey.